UFC 3 was like a perfect cross between Jerry Springer and the Epic Fighting Championship. And IP Vanish is like the more perfect cross between you and protecting your internet activity from outside interference. More on that later. Emmanuel Yarborough was the only fighter in UFC history whose height was exactly the same as his width. When measuring his wingspan, he didn't even have to put his arms out. They would literally measure the wings in front of him, the chicken wings. And that's not fat shaming or racism. It was just part of his training because he was a sumo wrestler. That fool wanted to get big and he was still eating in the cage. He was so big that he made Big John McCartney look like regular sized John McCartney. And this size is what allowed him to bust that door down with the help of Keith Hackney's body. But that same size is also what allowed him to tip over so easily. And then Hackney was able to land more shots to the back of the head than if he was Cirio Game. If this was a sumo match, Yarborough would have won. If you ignore the fact that it looks like his homie opened the door on purpose.
Look at it closely. Look at it closely.
But in a full-blown MMA match, Yarborough was similar to someone like Derek Lewis, better suited for the power slap. Personally, I would enjoy today's MMA a lot more if there was no time limits, or at least longer rounds. But Ken Shamrock versus Christoph Leninger had me watching at 5x speed. Ken Shamrock is actually one of my favorite fighters, but I've noticed that most of his UFC fights are boring.
You're better than that!
When he was fighting like The Rock, Big Van Vader, or Steve Person of Color, he was way more exciting. But when he fought in the UFC, he looked like he was trying to win his fights by way of osmosis. Conspiracists say that it wasn't even a real fight and that this was just some hardcore advertising for Leninger's judo school, which doesn't make any sense because he lost. But other conspiracists say that it was an ad by the Gracies in order to make the judoka look bad, because that supposedly Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was just a ripoff of the Judo Newaza that came long before it. And that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is basically the Panda Express of the martial arts. When I followed up with the Gracie to see what he had to say for himself, that fool left me on red. Leninger eventually tapped out to absolutely no submission at all. And fools are still calling that phone number and clowning on him till this day. Roland Payne's training consisted of him hitting non-moving pads and also hitting himself. And Harold Howard came into the fight with a wife beater and he said, "You are what you wear, homie." And that's exactly how we fought him. Like an angry individual with broken dreams and no impulse control. But that was all he needed, because even though Payne had shins full of steel, he had a chin full of sand, which ironically made Howard's training look pretty accurate and strategic. After the fact, of course, Payne simply had no response for the reach and the brute strength of Howard. And he took more shots than Israel Adesanya does before driving. And Roland Payne rolled in pain before being saved by regular sized John McCartney. The third UFC, and trying to locate it without the assistance of UFC Fight Pass had me thinking a lot about third-party interference. But IP Vanish helps keep your passwords, financial information, file transfers, and browsing activity safe from third-party interception by changing your IP address, protecting you and your activity from website trackers. By masking your location with IP Vanish, you won't be limited by any wrongfully imposed internet censorship restrictions. That's right. That means when you're on your office computer, you could get on Facebook and you could watch my YouTube videos. You don't have to hide with your phone in the bathroom like Benjamin Vega, although I do appreciate it. With IP Vanish, all of a sudden, it is safe for work. And it was born in the USA, man, it was Born in the USA, which is a big deal because I already know what you're thinking. A lot of VPN sites kind of seem like they're gonna steal your information.
All these things are false. So you are a scammer, not.
Oh, so I'm a scammer.
But the All-American IPVanish owns and operates its own VPN servers. Other VPN companies try to protect you from third parties by using third-party servers. Take advantage of this 30-day money-back guarantee with the largest and most trusted VPN in the US by going to ipvanish.com/Mexican martial arts. Your unstolen identity will thank you. Kimo Leopoldo claimed that he was a warrior in the service of the Lord, like Samson. So Royce Gracie went full Delilah, and he went after the source of his strength. This was after a few failed attempts at taking the fight to the ground. You see, the Gracies had big fat mouths because they wanted to get big fat wallets. So they kept teaching people their BJJ system. So Kimo came into the fight as a Gracie BJJ student, and he had no problem carrying Gracie's weight because he was so used to carrying that cross, which was a lot more significant in both weight and blasphemy. Even after a headbutt and a groin shot, he still couldn't take Kimo down. It wasn't until a reversal from Kimo that they ended up on the canvas, and he was able to hold his own against Gracie, often taking control, until Royce wove a little scalp gi together and started tugging on Kimo's hair. He was giving him that chemotherapy as follicle after follicle was ripped from his dome. Kimo's strength began to fade. Like Samson, Kimo prayed that God would give him strength just one more time so that he could get revenge. And that's when he realized that he was no Samson and that he was delusional. And he gave us one of the most reluctant and disappointed taps of all time. But his trainer slash best friend Bobby Lee said, "Chale, you still got more hair left." And he dragged Kimo back to the center of the cage while talking papas to the Gracies. And Helio actually loped up on him. But because regular sized John McCartney went full Dan Hardy on us, we'll never get to know who was the better grappler, Helio Gracie or Bobby Lee.
I was a wrestling team too. I was on the wrestling team. And if you look my
That's true.
Instagram,
It's
if you go
actually
down there, you can see wrestling photos. So I don't like your laugh, friend.
Keith Hackney was supposed to be facing Ken Shamrock in the semifinals, but supposedly Hackney got hurt.
And Keith Hackney, although he defeated Emmanuel Yarborough, and you're seeing a shot of the crowd, he got hurt.
Which doesn't make any sense to me, because after watching the fight again, there was no moment where Hackney appeared to be injured. There's only two options I could think of. One, Hackney injured his palm after that slap, or B, he was wearing shades backstage and tripped over a cable.
I don't think it's very funny anymore. And neither do you guys. I don't think you guys should think that's very funny.
But that's neither here either. Felix Mitchell ended up replacing him and fighting Ken Shamrock. The most exciting thing about this fight was when the announcer mentioned that Ken Shamrock was drafted by the San Diego Chargers but chose to fight instead. A close second would be when Mitchell tried to bite Shamrock. However, it was a failed attempt. It was still funny though, but then the announcer said that it wasn't even illegal during this event, but that you would just be fined $1,000.
There's no biting. There's no eye gouges. But if they're done, you're not disqualified. You're fined $1,000, and that goes to the man you did
That's
it
right.
to.
Per incident, $1,000 per incident.
Shamrock eventually got the submission, but in the end, both fighters were fined $1,000 for such a boring fight. Or at least I would like to assume so. Royce Gracie came all the way out to the cage and went through the announcements before he realized that he was not able to fight. I don't know if it was seeing Howard in that wife beater or knowing that even if he won, he'd have to go on to face Ken Shamrock. That's two opponents in a row with no gis. And that's after he already had to go no gi with Kimo. He wasn't about to try to pull on this wife beater because wife beaters are delicate and easily destroyed, just like wife beaters. The other kind. Gracie started acting like if he had a fever on a school morning, and Howard got hyped up for the finals. But no one got more hyped up than Kimo and Bobby Lee. Kimo was taking his credit for being the one to injure Royce Gracie and taking him out of the championship. And Bobby Lee was telling Royce Gracie, "You are not the father." And it was at this moment that they showed celebrities in the crowd for the first time ever. They had Gary Busey, Don the Dragon Wilson, and I'm pretty sure that's Bret the Hitman Hart. Keith Hackney had to pull out of a fight. Royce Gracie had to pull out of a fight. And now Ken Shamrock had to pull out of a fight, which is very typical in the modern era. But back in the day, it felt sketchy.
Pride only hurts. It never helps.
Some fools think that it was in order to allow alternate fighter / police officer Steve Jenna the opportunity to take on that wife beater. And just like I said before, the wife beater was delicate and easy to destroy. The only damage that Howard did throughout the whole fight was to his own ego. And then when he tried to submit Jenna, he basically submitted all of his own energy. Jenna broke free and gave Howard that protect and serve. From that point on, it was nothing but police brutality. Howard fought the law, and the law won. But many questions were left unanswered. What would have happened if Hackney fought Shamrock? What about if Howard would have fought Gracie? And don't forget about Helio versus Bobby Lee. And don't forget to do algorithm stuff so I could keep making these videos. Thank you for watching Mexican Martial Arts. Appreciate it. Good looking out. Late.